Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Getting Unstuck with Misfits Unplugged, where we're helping highly motivated hustlers achieve success and overcome career hurdles. We're two minority
Mhm.
women with a combination of street smarts and corporate America, bringing simplified business concepts to everyone.
And if you're feeling stuck in your career and having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out what your next step should be, you want to listen to Misfits Unplugged because we're going to be giving you little nuggets to help you get unstuck on the way.
I'm Isabel, and that's Brandy. Say hi, Brandy.
Hi, Isabel.
Guess that works. She doesn't follow direction, but it works. Today, we're going to talk about creating communication strategy and finding balance and knowing your audience. We're going to be focusing on how to tailor communications, build credibility in relationships, and as always, sharing some tips and tricks of how we've learned along the way. So,
Mhm.
BK, no surprise, you're going to kick us off and share with us. So, how have you built relationships and trust and credibility with your effective communication?
Well, so I think personally, and I'll go back to some of our last conversations, just starting with the fact that I am like a classic introvert. Because that drives my communication style, right? Like, and everybody is different. So when I'm talking about mine, I'm talking from the instance that, I'm probably not the person that's picking up the phone every 2 seconds, if I have a question, I'm probably not going to call you unless there's like, I know that it's going to get way too complicated over email. So, I mean, my primary go to is email just because I like to think through what I'm saying. I like to think through the questions that I'm asking and making sure that they're structured in a way that's not overcomplicating things. So, I think I start with that, but part of that is also just me when I'm structuring those questions, I'm looking for specific answers. And a lot of that is me needing to get back to somebody with an answer, right? Because I'm either solving a problem or I'm bringing back some information for a project. And so my credibility piece is just always being the person that's able to give a succinct answer that you don't necessarily have a whole lot of questions when I'm done with it. So my idea is, get all of the information up front. I like it in writing so I can go back to it if I ever need to. And that's not even my introversion. We work in an industry where when you're having off the cuff conversations about what can be done and what can't be done, sometimes it makes sense to have that kind of stuff in writing, so to speak. But I like writing and emails as my primary form of communication because it allows me to ask the right questions, get a lot of information, get out succinct answers, and not take up somebody else's time with the phone call when they could be doing something else. I mean, I like to think that that's me being very considerate of other people's time.
So I'm a little bit different in the way that I approach communication. So I am a pick the phone type of person, depending on the complexity, which I'll always follow up with a detailed email. But certain things don't translate well over email, especially depending on the level of detail in it. But I'll usually, like yourself, I will organize the email in detail, typically chronological order, taking like storytelling. I am a bullet point type of person too. So I'll
Mhm,
label and bullet point depending on the subject matter, because
mhm,
I want someone to be able to reference the email and be completely clear and answer any future questions because we're both future forward thinkers. Uh,
mhm,
so depending on what it is, though, if it's an escalation and I'm dealing with a personality, I will follow it up with a call, or I'll call first and say, okay, I'm going to send you an email, but I wanted to tell you it was on the way first and
mhm,
explain to you kind of high level, and then I have the details in email because what I've learned throughout my career is understanding the audience, and there's so many different types of personality. Some people I work with are high level, some people are detail oriented. So I try to balance how I'm communicating to the person I'm communicating to. So a partner of my firm, I'm not putting together a 3 paragraph email because he's gonna be, whoa, what's happening
yeah,
here?
yeah,
So depending on how I'm communicating is also how I'm carving it out. So if I'm sending a email that's going to be impactful to 200, 300 people, what I typically will do is I start it off with a high level for the people who have the attention span of a goldfish. I will high level
Definitely
highlight,
me.
bold, everything, what they're, they're looking at, and giving them
Mhm.
key takeaways. And then I'm saying, for anyone who wants additional details, see below or see attached. And then I provide all of the full details for anyone that wants to know all the moving parts or how the sausage is made, right? Just want the sausage. Other people want to know how it's made. So I
Mhm.
try to balance both of them depending on the audience, but typically with emails, I lean towards details as much as you do, to make sure also I'm very clear. Because a lot of
Mhm.
times the way that I communicate in my role, I need to be able to reference back to it, hold people accountable for doing what I've outlined, So I think
Mhm.
that details, I'm a detail oriented person. So I love more details because I want everyone also transparency. I want them to
Mhm.
understand sometimes not only what I'm saying, but why and how
Yeah.
they'll be impacted by it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's a balance. And for
Mhm.
anyone who doesn't know really how to best send an email, a long time ago, don't remember how, but or who had mentioned to me kind of like the fundamentals of sending an email. Because if you're sending an email that has some constructive feedback or it's a little bit more aggressive in the messaging, I typically started off with something positive. Hi, how are you doing? Hope all is well. I start with good news, whatever it is, a little bit of schmoozing. And then I
Mhm.
kind of work my way into the meat and potatoes of what the communication is. Like if the person didn't do something correctly, if they're missing something, if there's something that's going to be inconvenient to them in there, I'll outline it. And then I always bring it back with another positive message in my closing. And then I offer myself if they have any questions, concern, want to have a live chat to go through it, I make myself available and offer it.
Mhm.
9 out of 10 times, no one wants to pick up the phone and have a conversation, but I put it in there so it,
Just in
it takes
case.
that up a notch of my customer service skills in there.
Mhm.
And then, depending on what the role is. So in my role, I'm doing some escalations and problem solving. So I'll say, you're valuable to us. Your business is valuable to us. I want to make this a better experience. Send me feedback, XYZ,
Mhm.
kind of like save the
Mhm.
relationship. So that's usually like my approach with,
Mhm.
communicating electronically.
All of what you just said, all very spot on. And the key that I like to a lot of what you were talking about is knowing your audience, because I think that that's important and just sort of understanding, when you're trying to build relationships with people. And again, Isabel and I work in the same industry, but on two different sides of the coin. So the advisors are her clients, so to speak, and my advisors' clients are our clients, right? So sometimes, just dealing with um sensitive information, we're obviously not going to put that in an email kind of thing. So when you talk about just the the credence part of, what can people depend on, as far as I'm concerned, in my communication style is, you know one of the first things that we have when we bring a client on is what I consider onboarding, right? Because we have a whole system and a whole way that we want our clients to feel, that whole white glove treatment. So one of the first introductions to our firm is me having a client call. And a lot of that is me disarming people and letting them know, listen, I've been doing this a very long time. I'm your advocate. You want to make sure that you're telling me everything that I need to know so that I can position it in a way with the carriers to make sure that we get you the best possible rate in X, Y, and Z. Um, so knowing your audience is super important. I happen to work for an individual that loves long emails. um, as long as it's, not something really super sensitive or whatever the case, but he tends to err on that side as far as I'm concerned. So just kind of knowing your audience and knowing when it's important to pick up the phone, A, to either build a relationship, B, to put somebody at ease. And to Isabel's point about how to structure an email in general, whether you're sending it to a client or, to a boss or to a colleague. Somebody told me a long time ago to stay away from negative words with T at the end, like can't or won't, or, restructure your emails in a way that doesn't include those negative words, like something can't be done, but more err on the side of, we've tried a few different methods and these are the options that are available kind of thing. So
Yeah,
that
spot
was
on.
just a just to
Yeah,
piggyback.
because ultimately you might want to have to say you can't do it.
Mm-hmm,
But when you're saying that, you would want to say, here's the steps I've already taken to try to get this resolution. And then unfortunately, after trying one, two, three, four, five things,
mm-hmm,
we still can't, I will write can't in there, but I will write all the steps that we took. And unfortunately, we can't get a specific outcome. And maybe I can get them one of two things, but I can't get them both things. So so it depends on how you're communicating it. Um, One of the other things I would talk about is how to know your audience. So we know our
mm-hmm,
audience, but it's because we've gotten to know the people that we're corresponding with. So if your question is, okay, great, Isabel Brandy, I have no idea, my audience and how do I get to know them? Well, there's a couple of different ways. One, you can ask. So if it's a direct person that you work with, your boss, your peers, ask them, like, what's your preferred method of communication? Or you can observe how
mm-hmm,
they communicate.
mm-hmm,
There's usually people who are detail oriented in their communication are, love to receive that same type of details back. Now,
mm-hmm,
someone who is more high level is straight to the point in their communications probably want the same thing back.
mm-hmm,
So you can always ask them, or they might say, if it's this, keep it high level. I don't need all those details. But if it's around this topic, then please give me
mm-hmm,
more details, so if
mm-hmm,
maybe an update on an employee, maybe more details. If it's a project, maybe it's only milestones and how you've achieved, different things and what are your next steps in that specific
mm-hmm.
project or initiative. So
I
asking
like
those
that.
questions, I think help because we're all
Mm-hmm,
about, managing expectations, and understanding your audience is another way to manage their expectations of you and how you communicate outward.
mm-hmm,
When I first joined this organization, I started sending out emails on a larger scale. I have sent it out to people in the past, upwards of 100 and so on people. Um, and, I was always detail oriented. But at this firm, I learned more about my audience and the different people that were getting the communication. So when I craft one communication and it's hitting leadership of the organization, the sales community, their support staff, my teams, and it's going across the organization, it also helped me to stay away from industry jargon, certain things that not everyone who's reading it may completely understand. So I try to keep it as clear as possible, understanding that different audiences are going to review it.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes maybe I couldn't accomplish, trying to think about seven personalities in one communication. So I'll carve out one and maybe I'll create one or two attachments as one that's geared towards advisors, let's say our sales folks, and then one is more for supporting roles that need all the
Mhm,
details. So that's
mhm,
sometimes also how I would balance out my communications.
mhm.
And obviously with time management that you learned more about in the last episode, you're going to need time to carve all those
Yeah,
communications out because we're not going to discredit how much time it will take to put together communication because you also don't want to rush it out the door. You want to stop, especially depending, like Brandy, if you're sending an email to a client, you're not typing it up and sending it. You're going back, you're rereading it, make sure you have their name spelled correctly, that you're not
mhm,
emailing Jane Smith and you mean to email another client and you have that client
mm,
in your mind because you're doing multiple
mhm,
things. And
mhm.
then you're making sure to type it up all correctly. And then it makes sense.
I'm gonna give you a communications hack, and Isabel is in on this, but, you know, depending on your industry, but I think that this could kind of work across all industries, is really think about creating templates for yourself, particularly if you're dealing with, like Isabel said, she deals with a lot of different types of groups of people across a spectrum of different departments, right? I tend to deal with a lot of clients, a lot of centers of influence. And so, what you find when you've been working in an industry long enough that there's certain communication that you're going to do over and over and over and over again. So, if you find that you're sending the same email or having to type out the same email to 10 clients a week, or if you're having to give a report or an update to a boss on very similar, items on a week to week basis. Think about creating templates for those things. A, because it cuts down the amount of mistakes that you're going to make in actually structuring the email and you're just plugging and relooking. And two, if you're sending out reports or sending out communications to bosses or colleagues, people that you work with, it's it's good to get emails that look consistent from a particular person each time, because you know what you're looking for in the email, particularly if it has a lot of detail. So, communications hack, think about what communication you can template, the stuff that you do over and over and over again, create templates for them. There's a way for you to do it in Outlook via your signatures. So that's a time management hack too.
Yeah. I love that. We started doing that early on when you and I started working. So the two were, we started using the signatures for the different things that were like auto replies. And
Mm-hmm.
more so frequently, I use a lot more of the templating, me not directly, but my staff does.
Yeah.
So we have templates for when we're confirming something has been paid, sent, if we need more
Mm-hmm.
information. And it also causes synergy across the team because all of our communications look similar or the
Mm-hmm.
same, the formatting. So it's about creating the value. So no matter who's out of the office, when we're backing each other up, how we communicate out looks the same. So
Mm-hmm.
our clients are accustomed to it. So when they see it, it's clear and concise, and we're still building on that. But I think that that's great feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone needs to
Mm-hmm.
jot that down and start trying to do it because that is a game changer without a doubt. So, with all of the hacks that we've given and tips about the importance of communication, one of the other things about being effective at communicating and managing expectations and the detail and understanding your audience is you're building relationships and credibility as well with how you communicate. And I think that that's one of the things that early on helped me with building credibility. Everyone would understand that I am very responsive. Um, they could always rely on number one that I've received their email, that I'm working on it, because I don't know, Brandy, you probably have that you've sent this email and you're like, I don't know if this person has it. I don't know if they're doing it. They never respond, so and then you
Mm-hmm.
have that like distrust, and then you follow up 20 times because you don't trust that the person is doing it. And
Right.
that is a poor communicator because you're
Yeah.
building distrust, and then people don't even know you, but then they're already like, oh, I hate working
Mm-hmm.
with that person because
Mm-hmm.
they don't respond. So on
Mm-hmm.
the opposite end, you build credibility in your relationships because then now they know that you're so good at it. They trust you. They only want to work with you. And then
Mm-hmm.
that translates into your leadership as well, because they're going to say, Isabel has that. She'll respond with something comprehensive, detailed, and, it'll be taken care of. And
Mm-hmm.
those relationships that you build are the next stepping stones for you. That's somebody that's opening a door for you in another area. They're speaking
Very
highly of
true.
you and they're recommending you for different things and opportunities. So it might sound like just sending an email, but how you deal with a tough situation, how you respond, how you articulate yourself is going to stay at the forefront of the recipient's mind.
Yeah.
My specific role, I'm like CCing people. So maybe they're not the recipient, but they're in the CC, which is like a copy of the email. And they're seeing how, I go back and forth. So like my manager will say, great job, Isabel, on how you handled that. That was like a complete shit show. And you really did well in it, because she compliments. And, you and I both are like that, how things can be blowing up around us, but we know
Mm-hmm.
how to compose ourselves and we know how to take a step back. And I think that's the street smarts, the grit.
Yeah.
A fire, an administrative emergency isn't gonna like get me out of character, like
Yeah.
that's not gonna get me out of character. And I think that's part of the balance of our street smarts in the corporate America and how we
Mm-hmm.
respond to things.
Mm-hmm.
So how has building that credibility and trust in emails helped you in your career?
I think going back to just the comprehension of I think most people who work with me, who work for me, or who I work for will all, say the same thing about the responsiveness, but also I'm like a one and done kind of person, right? So if I'm going back to get information for you, if I'm solving a problem, um, you're not going to get a whole bunch of back and forth from me. A lot of people know that they can expect that they're going to get the answer, right? Because I've already asked all the questions that I needed to ask on the back end before you get that comprehensive response. So that's credibility, I think. And then, well, so you mentioned a lot about CCing, right? So um, I think that we may have done that a lot in our last job. And this one, CCing kind of hurts you a little bit, I think, just because my job is to make sure that my advisor is only doing revenue producing activities. So I tend not to CC him on things that he doesn't necessarily need to be involved in, or that's going to take him out of his, sales mode. My job is to take care of the client and to make sure that they're taken care of. So I think it's also just knowing your audience, knowing when to CC, when not to CC. Like sometimes CCing can get you in trouble. Um,
That's a good point. That's another strategy because depending on your role, you don't want to put
mhm,
everyone in it. So like my role is like 5 different areas. So I'm not
mhm,
CC the same person in all of my emails. So in
mhm,
one area, I might be sending direct communication. In another area, maybe I'm collaborating with someone, so I'm adding them in it. Then there's
mhm,
another area if I'm working with maybe our external brokers or clients. So I'm including, sales managers or other people part of a firm like yourself,
mhm,
one of my clients.
mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm including you and maybe several other people on your group in that communication, but it definitely is a strategy of understanding who is it. And that's a really good point because
Mhm.
if you include, let's say, you're complaining about someone, you mistakenly put them in that email, God, game over.
Listen, my mantra is only both ways too. My mantra is I'm only emailing the people that need to be in the know, or if I'm not sure who's going to answer me, so to speak, I'll put everybody on CC. But other than that, I don't do a whole lot of the CCC thing. And part of that is because I don't like to be on CC on CC'd on communication that doesn't have anything to do with me. So I think that I'm being considerate if I'm not throwing you on CC when there's really nothing that you can do in a particular situation. But,
Yeah.
I would definitely say to make sure that you understand your audience and understand your industry before you start taking my
Yeah.
advice
And I
on
think that's
that.
a good point because that's the next thing I was going to say because our roles are different in that aspect. So, because I work for the whole organization, I am included on things that are not necessarily directly impactful to my specific purview. But as
Mhm,
far as being a part of the operating committee and the function of the whole company, they'll include you on things to keep you a loop of what's happening around the firm
mhm,
because it may impact you down the line, or at least you're conscious of some of the efforts that are happening in other areas.
mhm,
So it really just depends on what it is. So it's really important to understand your role and what the expectations of you in the role are so that you're including the right people in those communications. Um,
mhm.
because CC could
That's
definitely
great.
get you. They can definitely get you. And you're like, this person isn't performing correctly, and here's all the things, and I think we should terminate them. And then you can see that person in the email.
Right.
Probably not in
You
your favor.
probably don't want to do that.
Or you're saying like someone you work with isn't performing correctly and you're giving like feedback so that your manager, speaks to that person. Like I've seen scenarios like that. So just make sure you're careful with who you
Mhm,
share.
mhm,
So with all of that, we've talked through the audiences, the power of communicating. The only other thing I would add is what I think is value is over communicating to a certain degree. So I told you my pet peeve is when I email someone and I don't hear back a confirmation, or it's a day later and I have to
mhm,
follow up, or the person doesn't have attention to email and you ask them, let me know about 1, 2, 3, and they only respond to number 1. And I'm like, well, what about number 2 and 3? And you have to go back and forth to get the answers on 2 and 3. That is
mhm.
like my attention to detail is on fire when people do that. So I would just say to make sure that you slow down, read emails thoroughly so that you answer all of the questions. Because when people are emailing you and they take the time to articulate the things they need, and then you respond quickly and only answer a third of what they're asking, that
Mhm,
also impacts your credibility in the relationships. So
yeah,
number one is slow down, respond thoroughly, like the person took the time to ask you the questions. The second piece of that I would say is depending on your role and your responsibilities, be proactive in your communication. So if you're working on something and maybe it's due in 2 weeks, maybe you want to provide an update in between of what your progress is, the time frame, you know,
mhm,
depending on what the expectations are of you in your role are. But I do think that sometimes providing updates and touching base with people is a nice touch to
mhm,
how you're handling it. That's a good balance of like customer service and or client service
mhm.
communicating.
I like that, and the only thing that I would add to that is, or that's probably an appendage to that, so to speak, is, um, and I think that this can go across all industries, is anticipate needs in an email. Try and think about what the client or or your colleague is not saying, right? Because a lot of times when people are asking you questions, it's great to get back to them with just the answer for what they asked for. But part of what I think that I've done really well over my time is anticipate needs. So when I go back and I'm looking at what somebody is asking me, I'm looking at getting them the answer, but I'm also looking down the road to see why this information might be important to them and what other questions they may have, once I get this information back to them. And sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes there is. And so when you talk about over communicating, it's almost like, I had an advisor tell me one time, what did he say? Under promise.
And over deliver.
Right.
Under
Under promise
promise,
and
but over deliver.
over deliver. Right.
It's
So,
managing expectations. It all comes down to
mm-hmm,
that. Yeah.
so anticipate
So I
needs,
agree.
people.
I was gonna apply like add those like hand clap emoji that I'm applauding what you're saying because in our field, and I think that's a supply across the field, across different industries, is that exactly what you said is anticipating someone's needs, and that
Mm-hmm,
just takes it up a notch. That adds some more credibility and relationship building and so on to you
mm-hmm,
because sometimes people don't know what questions to ask, so they'll ask you like, "Hey, you know, thinking of applying for XYZ, what do you think?" And then you
mm-hmm,
respond with just like general things and you're not giving them the additional details of things that they should be thinking through. And
mm-hmm.
that has definitely set you an eye aside in our insurance field because someone
Yeah.
will ask us a very, very specific question. And we were speeding it through and just checking the box mentality, we would reply with that specific answer. And
Mm-hmm,
sometimes that's creating a disservice that we're doing a disservice to, our clients because
mm-hmm,
there could be like, hey, well, did you think about this? Because this might actually be better for you and more time efficient.
mm-hmm,
Did you think about this? Because this actually, I don't think that you should recommend that. So
mm-hmm.
I spot on highlight what you're saying. I just said that I think a couple of times here, spot on. But that's something that you and I worked on together because it was that like a little bit more that helps someone and it avoids a lot of that back and forth too, because
It
after you
does.
respond, then they're going to come back with more questions. So if you think
Mm-hmm,
through what potential questions they're going to ask and just
mm-hmm.
carve it out a couple more minutes in that email,
Yep.
give yourself some back and forth.
Yeah. And built and you built a little bit of street cred. So
We're all about the street cred and the biz credibility. Well, because you want to create the career, right? So you want to build it. You want to build
Mm-hmm,
what your personal brand is. It's not
mm-hmm,
just the content creators that have brands. You have a personal brand. So you take a step back and you say, "Who is Isabel?" And I might have one thought of who I am, but I've never worked on like how other people perceive me. And that's how you build
mm-hmm,
a personal brand is how do you want people to perceive you to be? So
mm-hmm,
every little thing you put your fingerprint on should be exactly how you want people to perceive you. And that's as easy as an
mm-hmm.
email.
Yep. Yep.
So do you
Very
have any
true.
words of wisdom, Brandy, for anyone to jot down before we bring it on home?
I mean, I like what we just said, under promise and over deliver. Anticipating need, setting expectation is huge across all industries, no matter where you are in your communication style and the personal branding piece. That was great. Awesome.
As always, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. If you're new here, make sure that you hit the subscribe button before you log out for the day.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to definitely go back and listen to everything that you missed, though. So we'll give you some time and then you can come back.
That's right.
Go on to misfitsunplug.com. Make sure that you're logging in and you're signing up for our newsletter. We send it out on a monthly basis. That's just recapping to keep you in the know of what we're doing. And then periodically, we're going to send you out some exclusive tips and tricks and swipe files or templates to help you in your career. And we are available on Instagram under Misfits Unplugged as well. And we're dropping knowledge bombs on a daily basis. So jump on in, listen to our reels, watch it, live it in the moment. We want to hear from you. We are an engaging community of misfits. As always, thank you so much. We look forward to some more episodes and engagement with you. Take care.
Be great.
Be great.
Bye.
Bye.